Welcome everyone to our session today on demystifying cloud native security for NERC CIP compliance. Today we will tackle one of the biggest challenges facing energy and utilities companies, and that is balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational demands of IT and OT environments. We know that navigating NERC CIP requirements can feel overwhelming, especially with the misconceptions surrounding cloud adoption. And today we'll show you how Microsoft and Armor can simplify compliance, enhance security, and empower your organization to confidently leverage cloud-native tools. My name is Michelle Glassman. I'm Armor's marketing director, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for this critical discussion. Let's dive in and uncover how we can turn these challenges into opportunities. And I wanted to take a moment to mention about the Armor and Microsoft partnership. We have teamed up to deliver a stronger, more streamlined security experience for customers by pairing Microsoft's powerful security capabilities with Armor's hands-on expertise. Today, we're going to show you practical use cases to help you demystify this experience. And this partnership, it's not just about technology, it's about making security simpler, faster, and more effective for organizations that need it most. It's really about a safer digital future. Here's what we're going to cover today. First, we'll address some common misconceptions about NERC CIP compliance and the cloud. Then we'll explore Microsoft Security Stack and how it's applied in the real-world scenarios. We'll also walk through a technical deployment and discuss how it aligns with compliance requirements. And finally, we'll wrap up with a live Q&A to answer your questions. So let's go ahead and get into the meat of it. And let me introduce you to our experts today who are going to guide you through the session. First, we have Nancy Free, our Chief Compliance and Data Privacy Officer at Armor. She brings extensive experience in compliance and innovation. Next, we have Sharon Coe. She's Chief Product Officer at Armor, and she will share her insights on product strategy and implementation. And finally, we have John Spade. He is our cybersecurity customer experience leader from Microsoft and will provide a unique perspective on aligning security solutions with customer needs. So together, we're all here to help you navigate the complexities of compliance and security. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Nancy. Thanks, Nancy.
All right, welcome everyone today to our session. We're going to start unpacking today's one of the biggest misconceptions in our industry, the idea that NERC CIP restricts cloud adoption. The truth is far simpler and far more empowering. NERC CIP doesn't ban cloud, but it does enforce accountability. With the right controls and documentation, energy companies can confidently leverage cloud-native tools like Microsoft Sentinel to strengthen monitoring, analytics, and security. Now, before we dive right in, I believe it's important to make sure we're all speaking the same language. We're nothing if not in love with our acronyms these days, and in this case, it's going to be very critical in understanding where the lines are drawn. So NERC CIP are North America Electric Reliability Corporation's Critical Infrastructure Protection Standards. This is the mandatory cybersecurity and operational risk framework for any organization that owns, operates, or impacts the bulk electric system, or BESS, which is the high voltage generation and transmission grid in North America. These standards were implemented to ensure grid reliability by protecting the systems that control it from cyber and physical threats. Given the seriousness of the threat and our dependence on the grid, NERC CIP is federally enforceable in both the US and Canada, with fines for noncompliance up to $1 million per day per violation. While the risk of fines can be concerning to registered industries, it's more the risk of losing control through cyber and physical threats that would personally keep me up at night. I don't know about you. So let's talk about what we're protecting here. The BESS cyber systems, or BCS, this is one or more of your BESS cyber assets logically grouped into a group performing one or more reliability tasks for a functional entity. Your BESS cyber asset, or BCA, this is a cyber asset that, if rendered unavailable, degraded, or misused, within 15 minutes could adversely impact reliability of the BES. So as an example, you might group all the RTUs, the servers, HMIs, network switches together for a particular control room that supports a reliability function in a single BCS. So you've got your BCAs, that's your single cyber asset. BCS, it's the logical grouping of cyber assets. So now you go to your BCSI. That's your BES cyber system information. This is the information about the BCS or BCA that, if it's disclosed, modified, or destroyed, could negatively impact the reliable operation of the BES. The BCSI is not the cyber asset itself. This is the data describing it, that's configuring it, it's enabling the cyber system. It is not general IT documentation that's unrelated to BES reliability. It is not public system data. It is not outage maps, and it is not normal business records. Some examples of BCSI would be your configuration and settings information, your network diagrams and architecture, identity and access information, system design, engineering documentation, even backup files containing your BES system data. So now that we're speaking the same language, let's get to why we're here. So it's the great myth that NERC CIP standards forbid the use of cloud technologies within the bulk electric systems. And this has been out there for ages due to legacy interpretations of the CIP, lack of uniform auditor guidance, maybe even some cultural resistance within OT. No doubt there is some fear of losing control of critical infrastructure, but that's just not the same as the actual restriction by NERC against the cloud. And let me tell you, friends, it's just not true. Now, that's not to say that there's not rules. You know that there's going to be rules. That's why we had the vocabulary lesson. Your BCS systems, that is your EMS and SCADA systems, control center operation systems, protection and relaying data, and really any cyber asset that directly affects reliable operation of the BES, those are going to be a hard no for the cloud, and they must remain on-prem to address physical security standards. But your BCSI, all the SCADA data lakes, your mock SCADA, predictive analytics, your asset health, planning and modeling, digital twins, your SOC and SIM correlation, and much, much more. All of this your BCSI can be in the cloud, and it can remain compliant there too. So, of course, you want to make sure when you're thinking about being compliant in the cloud, the best thing to do is always going to be to work with your auditors for the best approach in your specific situation. Generally speaking, I always look to maintain compliance in this way. So first, you're going to have to speak to the CIP person in charge in your area and your regional entity to bless your scoping. Ultimately, compliance risk depends on your specific implementation and your region's interpretations. There's just absolutely no substitute for proper scoping. Secondly, treat your CIP 011-3R1 and your CIP 004-7R6 as your anchor controls. These address your information protection program and your access management for BCSI. Your cloud BCSI design, contracts, and procedures should all map directly to these requirement parts. Beyond that, update your CIP 003, 004, R1 and R2, and CIP 013 artifacts to explicitly call out BCSI in the cloud. And that includes your policies, SCRM plans, training, awareness, and RSA narratives. NERC has guidance out there as your reference set in RSA and internal reviews. Yeah, you might want to read some implementation guidance. They've got usage of cloud solutions for BCSI, and they have a technical reference for BCSI in the cloud tabletop exercises. Or you could work with trusted vendors with tools and expertise that make cloud more secure and compliant. But at the end of the day, it's important to remember that tools alone do not equal compliance, and neither does just signing up a vendor, regardless of how amazing the contract is. There will always be controls and obligations that you have to meet to ensure compliancy, and you are always the obligatory partner to ensure compliance for your organization. That said, Microsoft and Armor working together, we already mentioned this great partnership that we have. We're creating opportunities that strengthen your security while lightening your compliance burden. So I'm going to turn things over to John Spade, and we're going to hear more about how that happens. John?
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. Well, as she said, Microsoft, we run the platform that a lot of utilities and a lot of our other customers in the energy industry as well use to host a lot of their applications, to do a lot of their business. And the reality is a lot of the tools that they have that are from a security perspective in those licensing products and as well as on the platform tend to be unused in some cases because of this historic misconception that Nancy outlined. So I want to clear up on the Microsoft side and define that there's a lot of capability here that most people are familiar with. But there's a lot more ability to leverage these tools in these types of environments than they're getting today, because we have a robust trust and compliance model across all of M365 and Azure. The reality is that Microsoft doesn't want to be just a vendor that is selling you software. We don't want to be the people you call for support when something breaks. We want to be a trusted partner. We want to be able to build these architectures. We want to implement these solutions with you. And in my job, I lead a large team of people that help our customers implement these solutions across the most complex and largest environments in the United States. So it is likely that someone on my team has worked with you or your organization on some of these products. And in many cases, we've done this inside of a BES and inside of the boundary where these assets exist. Let's start by talking about what we have in Azure and what we can use to support NERC CIP compliance from a product perspective. We have Microsoft Sentinel. That is our SIM. And there is not a log that I have encountered on any place in a network or in any format that we cannot ingest into Sentinel in some form or fashion. There's always some way to move it, copy it, transform it, and ingest it into Sentinel, and then do all of the security detections and correlations that you want to do in that SIM. I have shipped logs out of the most restrictive environments using technologies that were invented 20 or 30 years ago in some cases. But we can definitely get it in there, and we can definitely do correlation across these environments. And the goal overall is not just to have something new and easier to support, which is of course good, but to enable new detections and make you more secure and more compliant, make this NERC CIP compliance easier. The other product suite that we have that really helps with this is our XDR product suite. And that includes products like Entra ID, Identity Protection, Defender for Office, Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, and Defender for Cloud Apps. That XDR platform will work with your NERC CIP compliance assets that are subject to that compliance. It will work across all of those areas to help you demonstrate that you are doing the right things for access control and that you are protecting the information that resides in the cloud and on-prem at that point. The other thing that helps in a lot of cases is Purview. Purview helps you classify your data. So if you want to label your BCSI and make sure that those data points are protected at all times, Purview will help significantly there. We can do things like automatically label, control access, add layers of encryption, prevent external sharing. A lot of this is pretty much entry level and needs to be done before you even begin to have a lot of this data up there. And Purview is ready to do that on the platform from day one. And another piece that needs to be mentioned is a Defender for IoT. Defender for IoT works in OT environments to extend that XDR visibility down into your SCADA and your ICS environments where these assets live. Defender for IoT is and can be like a passive monitoring for very sensitive, right, life safety environments. We're using it in all kinds of industries, from manufacturing to utilities, oil and gas production to refining, to airlines, all kinds of places where there is legacy technology. There's real-time operating systems. There's things that are very sensitive to things like vulnerability scans and such. And Defender for IoT can passively monitor network traffic, enumerate assets, load that data into the XDR panel, and really help you have a single pane of glass across all of your IT and OT assets, and be able to enforce and show that you're enforcing the same sets of controls across all of those environments. This is really going to help you with your NERC CIP compliance because it shows that you're not limited by a legacy technology. You're using something modern. You're using something that you consistently look at. It's not special. It's not this thing that we put over with a different team. It's not something that somebody with very specialized skills has to necessarily know how the details of it and how to run it, or that you have to go through and make sure that you're patching all on its own now within that perimeter. The sensors and all of the cloud infrastructure are managed by us in this case. Like the cloud infrastructure is ours, you just have a sensor to go ahead and manage and take care of. Really, what I want to emphasize here is that the standards updates that were done to CIP 4 and CIP 11 allow the storage of the BCSI data in cloud environments with the right controls. What that amounts to in our environment is a lot of access control and reviews on who has access to the data and the systems that work within the BES. And that is how we can do things like we can patch with like Azure Update Manager. We can take your patching and you can set up patch windows. You can set up certain patch level requirements. You can phase updates throughout the environment. All of those things are fully cloud enabled at this point. And instead of relying on infrastructure that you have to set up and run and provides it just adds to the risk of your environment, really. It gives you the opportunity to let Microsoft run that service, run it in a compliant way that we can show you, pick the regulatory framework, pick the compliance framework, whatever you need to see. We usually have something around that, like a SOC 2 or FedRAMP documentation on standards that we're aligned to for these services. And that can be your supporting documentation on how you run and secure these systems. So really what it comes down to is leveraging the platform controls that you already have available to you through the Microsoft platform to make sure that your access control, encryption, logging, and detections are all working together and that you have very good regulatory compliance evidence. But on top of that, you actually accomplish the goal of all this regulation, and that is that you increase security, you decrease the operational requirements of that for your teams, and in the end, deliver more energy safely to your customers. So with that, I would like to hand it over to my friend Sharon Coe, who is the product manager at Armor. Sorry, Chief Product Officer at Armor.
So in my section, I really just want to bring together a little bit what Nancy and John have both, rightly covered and really grounded in a real world example. So one that I did want to talk about today is one of our largest customers, and they kind of operate pretty broadly across not just power, but also defense and aerospace. They're a huge company, as you can imagine, thousands of employees, 20 billion in market cap, 3 billion in annual revenues. And for them, they are bounded by incredibly strict compliance requirements. So operating so squarely in the center of critical industries, and they also serve high-stake customers like the US DoD, and their customers in turn place significant scrutiny on their security and compliance posture. So for them, compliance and security really isn't optional in any way. It was mission critical, and it is mission critical today. And they manage a lot of extremely sensitive intellectual property alongside these critical systems that are, day to day generating all the power that we rightly need. But their workloads also need to constantly be performing. We need to guarantee performance as well as reliability for them as well as for their end customers. To kind of make things a little bit more complicated as well, they constantly have an active M&A strategy as well. And so that means that any time that they're onboarding any new subsidiaries, we as Armor and Microsoft are also there alongside with them to make sure that their new subsidiaries are also compliant to as they roll in and fold into the business. And so this customer, they partnered together with Arma and Microsoft to really help them deliver on the 3 pillars that matter the most to them in safeguarding that IP and in ensuring operations are running well. The first one was a no-brainer for us. It was making sure that there is 0 downtime during critical operations. So whatever that we're implementing to secure things, to optimize things, the underlying tenet was always no downtime. That is not acceptable. The second thing there was also uncompromised compliance. I think a lot of us tend to feel sometimes that compliance can slow us down on the business side. It is something that we have to, jump through hurdles and hoops to get across, especially as the standards multiply in number and as they get more complex. Sometimes also dealing with some of the ambiguity that Nancy helped to help us, defud and demystify as well, really adds to a lot of that overheads that we experience in that realm. And so that was one thing that they really came to us as a problem that they wanted us to help them solve. How can I accelerate this? How can I simplify a lot of these heavy audits and all those overheads that do happen? This last pillar is an interesting one and something that's super near and dear to my heart, especially. It's proactive threat defense. We often think of compliance and security as kind of 2 separate-ish things with some layers of overlap. But really, I think they're just 2 sides of the exact same coin. And proactive threat defense is something that is built on that second layer of after you've put in, all the basic checklists, all the foundational items, you've completely ticked every box off NERC CIP. How do you also go above and beyond to make sure that you are continuously monitoring and holding true to the ultimate outcome that we all want to have, which is to have a safe and secure energy system and a grid as well. And so ultimately really safeguarding their critical infrastructure without slowing down their mission was what we were trying to do together with, Armor and Microsoft and this partner in hand. So not to drown you in all the nitty-gritty details, but we did want to highlight a couple of pertinent examples of how we really come together, technology as well as services and expertise, alongside Microsoft to help customers in the energy space really meet frameworks and standards like NERC CIP. So as John mentioned, Microsoft provides a whole slew of very advanced security technologies. This is your Defender for Sentinel, Defender for IoT, Defender for XDR, Microsoft Sentinel, and the like. And they deliver tremendous security capabilities that really meet a lot of what NERC CIP stipulate and requires of its regulations. But technology alone, as we've mentioned, does not make you compliant. And the compliance outcome really depends heavily on how those tools are implemented and the expertise behind them and the applied configurations that kind of keep them operating correctly day after day. In the countless of implementations that we've had, it is going to be quite shocking to most people how often we go in and we see customers who technically have checked all the boxes. There is an AV installed, there is the right firewall, there is segmentation, there is this and that, but the outcomes don't seem to read the same. And the devil is in the detail. When we pry in and we look into the admin console and we look at the policies, the thousands of policies that have been implemented there, that's usually where there is an issue, where somewhere someone has left behind an access control policy from eons ago and it's left open, or a firewall rule that says, fail open for whatever reason. There's a lot of these things that, we think it's silly in hindsight, but that in actuality do happen day to day, especially in big complex environments, and especially where there's a lot of, change management and things that we do need to kind of work through on a day-to-day basis as well. And so if we kind of look at these two main ones that are, I think, quite relatable to most folks, if we look at R3, which is malicious code prevention, this is where technologies like Defender for IoT and Defender for XDR really, really shine. It's about preventing malicious code from running on said systems. It's also about the detection of malicious code in order to prevent it from actually happening. And so while Defender for XDR and IoT are great at catching that, they look at signatures, they do detonation, they do a lot of that. It's also about the configuration piece where Armor can come in and we help you to make sure that we have the right policies set on the right assets, depending on what their job or goal essentially is, and making sure that we harden them down, making sure that you're catching and getting all the right signals that you need to see. It's also oftentimes pretty simple things like having 24/7 eyes on screen as well, not just only to make sure that the asset is live, visible, healthy, but also if and when something does happen, you see a suspicious payload, a suspicious file, a suspicious PowerShell command, who is there to help you ascertain whether or not that really is a threat. That requires a certain level of expertise to kind of dig into it, to kind of unpack what exactly was in that command line. Is this legit, or is this just a typical, someone's doing testing or your dev team is doing something? It could be one of those situations, and really weeding through a lot of that noise is something that we've spent decades to get really good at. And then just to parlay that into R3 of security event monitoring, there's, obviously a lot of specific requirements around log everything, log it for how long, make sure not only that you have the logs to check on a rainy day, but also how do you generate the right alerts so that you're getting the signals, right? You're getting the right data points to tell you, hey, there might be something suspicious that's happening over there. And obviously you need to review the logs and the alerts on a continuous basis. And so that's something that Microsoft Sentinel does amazingly well. I think John was a little bit humble today. He, during our rehearsal, was like, Microsoft Sentinel can ingest any log out there, any data, and I can vouch for that. I've not seen anything that Sentinel cannot ingest yet. So we welcome that challenge. And on Armor's side, obviously, what we do day in, day out, it's really configuring all of that ingest, making sure also that, cost is sometimes an issue that you want to work around. And it's not just ingesting everything and anything, it's also making sure that what you're ingesting is of high security value and is also obviously what's needed for your compliance requirements as well. And so there's a lot of tricks that we can do with data transformation. Those are really kind of the additional stuff that we do. We're not just general ProServe that comes in, installs stuff and walks away. No, there's a lot of expertise that comes in our recommendations and how we, make those advisory guidelines around how you should ingest certain things, how long you should store them for, but also in the configuration of rules, like how do you trigger alerts, how do you define that? There is a certain science and art in that, and that's what we've devoted a lot of R&D and a lot of effort into as well, and the continuous backing, again, of our amazing Security Operations Center team that is always looking at logs and alerts. And I'd say that's really one of the biggest pulls and benefits of having a third-party MDR, managed detection and response company, to come in and do this for you, because we're not just looking at threats on one customer. We have 1,700 customers. So aside from just this amazing pool of energy customers that we're looking at, we're also seeing telemetry and attacks across a whole slew of industries. And you do have adjacent industries that will have a pretty similar attack surface to you. And so you get to benefit from us protecting, knock on wood, patient zero from somewhere else, and kind of quickly passing that knowledge and that intelligence over to you proactively, because that's the level of service that we do render to all of our customers. So with that, I really hope this gives you a better view of how the technology plus the services and all of it really comes well together. And with that, I'll hand it back to Michelle, who will kind of guide us through the Q&A session. So thanks, Michelle.
So one of the common questions that we get that's in the Q&A there is how do we manage configuration changes in the cloud without losing compliance? And I'll jump on that one and let anyone follow up if they want to afterward. It's really about access control and planning and documentation. We have a very robust identity platform, of course, called Entra ID. And the permissions management within Azure, which is called Azure Role-Based Access Control. So we have a lot of capability to get very granular and follow principles of least privilege and make sure that users and service principals and automation accounts, all of the things that can change configuration, all of those are restricted to the very least amount of privilege that they need. And in a lot of cases with conditional access, we can even restrict where they're coming from, what devices they're using, the types of devices, and making sure that they are on compliant devices. And that everything that is managing the configuration changes themselves on these environments is already at the highest security level that we can possibly get to. And that's just to gloss over things like passwordless authentication with MFA and all the other sort of boilerplate stuff that you hear about these days. But we have a very robust framework for that. And in a lot of cases, for example, the patch management that I talked about earlier, building out like a phased approach to rolling out your patches and things like that, or other configuration changes, is a lot easier when you're only focused on rolling out those configuration changes and planning them. And that's what things like Azure Update Manager and Sentinel allow you to do, is you can actually go in and pay attention to the changes themselves. You don't have to worry about patching the infrastructure on which this stuff runs. You don't have to worry about making sure, for example, that the communications are secure and compliant, because in the case of almost everything I just talked about and the way we ship logs, everything is required to be HTTPS. Everything is certificate pinned and simply can't communicate from a TLS perspective with things that are not the Azure cloud in your tenant and with that managed identity. So we have this actually a lot more locked down if the configuration is correct. And that's the part that you get to focus more on. And that's the part that Armor can help with significantly too, is the actual implementation of those solutions that Microsoft builds and runs on our side. And then Armor can definitely provide a lot of expertise on the configuration, access management, and helping you build your case for NERC compliance on top of that. Sharon or Nancy, do you have anything to add?
I'll jump in and add, from an auditor perspective, anytime you're looking at configuration management, an auditor is going to come to you and want to know about your procedures, your standard operating procedures on how you're managing things like that. They're going to want to know, do you have anything like a FIM in place that you're actively monitoring to look for configuration changes? Do you have a configuration change management board that's looking at change management processes or approvals, things of that nature? Just a few other just procedural type things that maybe are not always on the tech side of things, but those are also things that they come in and look for. So it's never always solved by technology. Auditors will always come for something that's paper and manual and obnoxious. So that's usually this other side of things.
That's so true. But
Yes.
I had a controversial opinion that honestly, it's almost a little bit easier to prove compliance in the cloud just because everything is audited and everything is logged nowadays, and you have infrastructure as code and you have all those guardrails. It's not you trying to chase down a user who clicked something when no one else was looking. Like almost everything is quite documented today. And so, even in the way that we handle Defender or for XDR or Sentinel, for example, we use infrastructure as code. We don't do click ops as well. It's not just because it's less efficient and we have scale and automation if we do things by code, but just the auditability and the change management, the ability to roll back, the ability to know when we pushed what is just amazing to kind of help with proving out compliance and proving out that change management capability.
We have a question from Kyle. He says, have there been NERC CIP regulated entities that have made the move to cloud for a specific function? Which functions? And have they been through an NERC CIP compliance audit without issue?
I'll just say yes. I'm sure that I have not personally audited them. But yes, I mean, there's references that you can go out and investigate about. They refer to them as modern regulated industries or modern enterprises. But yes, there's. Do we have another slide? Yeah, we do have a slide on that. But
yeah.
But yes, they are out there. They do exist.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to that on the Microsoft side. Of course, we work with a lot of utility customers. I have a significant number of them using all the solutions that I've talked about today, and protecting their BCSI data, as well as to kind of cross over into another question that I see in the Q&A there, about EACMS. Yes, the tricky part about the utility industry right now, with you all, to be candid, is you all want to talk to each other, and none of you want your names attached to it if we talk about you. So I can't name any customers right here, right now, although I'm working on trying to be able to do that privately between utilities and energy providers. So we're working on that. But all of these systems, if they get declared in, if they're declared in EACMS, and if they are protecting these types of systems, the key is really what was on the slide earlier, is that you are going through and doing very fine-grained access control, showing that you're doing access reviews and audits, and that you have a very robust detection mechanism for when any of those principles are violated. And that's really what Sentinel provides itself directly, is not only do we have the controls that you can put up front that should prevent any unauthorized or unusual malicious access, but you would be able to detect if that occurred outside of parameters that you have set up in that system using Sentinel. And then from an information protection perspective, Purview can do a lot of the labeling. We can do data catalog. We can make sure that structured, unstructured, however it occurs, when you get BCSI in your environment, it is protected. And that data out of Purview, the audit logs, can be integrated directly into Sentinel as well. And that pulls right into, again, doing detections for when unusual things happen. So when you see things happening with the BCSI data or with labeled data that you suspect shouldn't be, or maybe it's just an outlier, maybe it's something that's totally permissible, but it's a rare event and you want to investigate it every time it comes up, that's where Sentinel comes in and can really assist with that stuff. And my team has a lot of expertise in Sentinel and how to build that, how to ingest logs and everything like that. And where Armor really just puts the icing on the cake, so to speak, is their expertise with NERC CIP and utilities, and doing the actual access controls and the consulting around building this program and the documentation that you need to pass these audits and justify your decision making to the auditors.
So Danielle's asking, NERC CIP 15 has come up frequently, being released earlier this year. Anything that you can share about that?
So, I mean, 15 is all about, internal network security monitoring and east-west traffic, basically. So a lot of the solutions that we're talking about, especially when they're cloud enabled, are going to be passing through whatever you're using for that east-west traffic inspection. But we also enable it with a number of our solutions. I'll give an example that I have of when we set up Defender for Endpoint or Defender for Identity, when our incident response teams go to a customer that's in a compromise, we actually deploy a proxy and cut off all of the network access to those affected networks and route everything through that proxy. And that proxy, I'm happy to say, is is now publicly available in open source, like the way we configure that and send that out is available. And that'll really help with your east-west traffic in these environments. It's why my team and I push so hard to actually open source that internally instead of keeping it a tool that we use during our own incident response. It's something we wanted to make available to customers because it will help restrict that east-west traffic easily and give you something that is very rapid to set up. It's not terribly complicated. It's just a script that gets run on a proxy that you want to set up, and it immediately allows access only to the endpoints in the cloud that are necessary for Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Identity, so that you can run those things in these environments and know that they're very isolated. And then you can layer in your east-west traffic control, whether that's through a firewall or a transparent proxy or something like that. You can do those on top of that as well and have even further assurance that those assets aren't communicating outside of what you want to define as your perimeter in this case.
Cognizant of time, I'll just chime on one small little thing that, this is kind of like version 1, and there were hints towards like a version 2 being introduced, and that will be expanded to, be part of the broader network as well. And so just something to think about, whenever we do think about these changes is, while yes, we do need to address the immediate, network visibility and control and items that were stated for version 1, to also kind of have that pathway and forward visibility into how can we have a consistent approach for that broader network as well, because it is beneficial to have that full network visibility and control overall.
Stop letting NERC CIP myths slow modernization. Learn more at armor.com.